Welcome to Starbound. My name's Aram, and I'll be your narrator today. Nearly 500 supporters get early access to our stories, including brand new episodes of Sunspire Academy and Freyrin and Remike. If you'd like to unlock early access and support new episodes and future series, tap Join below to become a Starbound member. Now, let's get into today's story. The Hegemony Military Academy's main auditorium thrummed with the particular frequency of several hundred excited cadets trying to contain themselves. Kes Caparo sat in the middle section with his fellow Rulani, their natural armor plates clicking against seatbacks as they shifted and whispered. The sound reminded him of wind through dry grass back home, if grass were made of living metal and whispered about combat ratings. "Earth," Dara muttered from beside him, managing to load the single syllable with enough disdain to poison a small moon. 6 years in the Alliance and they think they can teach us warfare. Kes kept his response neutral. 10 generations of his family had served in the Rulani Guard, and diplomatic restraint came with the bloodline. They held off a Soros Syndicate invasion fleet with 20th century technology. That earned them a seat at the table. Luck. Dara's upper plates rattled dismissively. And desperation. Not the same as proper military tradition. Commander Thrin Al-Void took the stage, all 4 arms moving in the synchronized pattern that meant attention in Althari military sign. The auditorium fell silent, except for the environmental systems cycling air between 7 different species requirements. Kes tasted the slight metallic edge that meant the oxygen mix had been calibrated for mammalian lungs. Everything here bent toward accommodation. "Cadets!" Thrin's voice carried without amplification. A trick of Althari vocal cords that evolution had designed for commanding armies across mountain valleys. "Today marks a new phase in your training. The Sol system has provided their contribution to our combat simulation archives." A ripple of interest passed through the gathered students. The Hegemony's military academy prided itself on having the most comprehensive combat scenarios in known space. Everything from Althari mountain sieges to Seshian deep void ambushes, all rendered in perfect holographic detail. You could smell the sulfur winds of Kepler 442b, or feel the pressure changes of underwater combat on Threshold. Adding Earth's conflicts would expand their tactical database by centuries of additional warfare. "However," Thrin continued, his lower arms folding in mild disapproval, "their methods differ from our standard submissions. Rather than tactical recordings or strategic reconstructions, Earth has provided what they term full sensory combat memories." The whispers started again. Dara's plates clicked in a pattern that meant amusement. "They're sharing their nightmares. How quaint." A door opened at the side of the stage. The human delegation filed in with none of the military pageantry Kes expected. They walked like people heading to breakfast, not instructors about to shape the next generation of Hegemony officers. He counted 5 humans, trying not to stare at their asymmetries. One woman moved on a prosthetic leg that whirred faintly with each step. A man's left arm ended at the elbow. Another's face bore a web of scar tissue that pulled his features into a permanent, almost smile. The woman with the prosthetic took position beside Thrin. Her uniform bore the name Okafor, and symbols Kes didn't recognize. Probably rank insignia, though humans did everything backwards. "I'm Corporal Natalie Okafor," she said, and her voice carried its own kind of authority. Not Thren's evolutionary advantage, but something earned in darker places. "Behind me are Sergeant Jerome Washington, Lieutenant Pavel Volkov, Captain Louis Wong, and Private First Class Maria Santos. We're not here as combat instructors. We're here as primary sources." A smaller human stepped forward. Dr. Tanaka, according to the civilian identifier on her coat. She carried herself with the careful movements of someone who spent more time in laboratories than gravity wells.
The memorial capture technology was originally developed for therapeutic purposes. It extracts complete sensory experiences from willing subjects. Every sight, sound, sensation, emotion. When you interface with these memories, you won't be watching war. You'll be living it.
Thren's upper arms gestured toward the preparation stations along the walls. Cadets will process through in cohort groups. The first memory is from Earth's second global war, the siege of Stalingrad. Those who complete the full experience will progress to subsequent memories. So, a Sician cadet raised a webbed hand. What constitutes failure? Thren looked to Okafor, clearly expecting her to answer. She was playing cards with the one-armed man, barely glancing up. Failure? There's no failure, kid. Some people finish, some don't. Both teach you something. The card game drew Kess's attention. The veterans weren't watching the cadets file toward preparation stations. They weren't reviewing notes or checking equipment. They played cards like people in a waiting room, killing time before an appointment they'd rather skip. Cohort 7, Thren called. Kess's group rose, armor clicking in unconscious synchronization. Dara strutted toward the stations. Upper plates flared in anticipation. Finally, real combat experience, not these sanitized academy exercises. Neural interface crowns waited on sterile white pedestals. Kess lifted his, surprised by the weight. Human technology tended toward the crude but functional. The crown felt like wearing a decision.
Stalingrad, winter 1942.
Dr. Tanaka's voice came through the prep room speakers.
You'll be experiencing the memories of Private Mikhail Volkov, grandfather of our Lieutenant Volkov. He was 19 years old, part of the 284th Rifle Division. The memory begins during the siege's 4th month.
Kess settled the crown on his head, feeling the neural meshes seeking connection points. His academy training included full sensory simulation, but those were reconstructions, clean data translated into experience. This felt different already, like the difference between a medical diagram and an autopsy.
Initiating transfer,
Tanaka said.
Remember, you can disengage at any time by...
Cold. Not the academic understanding of low temperature. Not even the cold of Rulani mountain winters where his family earned their first honors. This cold had weight. It pressed through inadequate clothing. Why was he wearing fabric? Where was his armor? And settled into bones like an infection. His stomach cramped around nothing. When did he last eat? Yesterday? 3 days ago? Time meant nothing when every hour felt like dying slowly. Kess tried to access his training, to observe tactically, but the body, Mikhail's body, wouldn't cooperate. Fingers too numb to feel the rifle. Feet like blocks of wood stumbling through rubble that used to be streets. The smell hit worse than the cold. Shit and cordite, and something sweet sick that meant bodies frozen too solid to bury. A whistle. Incoming artillery. Mikhail's body moved without his input, diving into a crater that already held 3 corpses. The shells walked closer, each impact shaking loose clouds of pulverized concrete that mixed with snow into gray slush. One of the corpses wasn't dead. It opened its eyes. Just a boy, maybe 16, and tried to speak through lips turned black with frostbite. The memory didn't let Kess close his eyes, didn't let him think about anything except the German tanks grinding closer through the ruins. The ammunition count, 14 bullets, make them count. The boy dying beside him, trying to whisper about his mother. When the shooting started, Mikhail's muscle memory took over. Point, shoot, watch a gray uniform fold backwards. Point, shoot, miss because your hands won't stop shaking. Point! The sniper's bullet took him through the throat. Kes felt it, not the clean simulation of damage markers, but the actual sensation of lead tearing through flesh, the hot spray of his own blood freezing before it hit the ground. Mikhail tried to call for a medic, but his throat was just a hole now. The boy beside him was still whispering about his mother. The world narrowed to that whisper, and the taste of copper, and the cold, always the cold, until... Kes ripped the crown off, gasping. His plates rattled uncontrollably, threat response to an enemy that existed 60 light years and 2 centuries away. Around him, other cadets were doing the same. A Darathi had fallen off their platform, legs twitching in neurological distress. Someone was crying. Might have been him. Rulani tears ran internal.
22 minutes,
Tanaka noted, voice carefully clinical.
Longer than most first exposures.
Kes looked for Dara, found him still under, body rigid with determination. Of course, their clutch brother would chew glass before admitting weakness. Others weren't so proud. A third of the platforms stood empty, their users fled to recovery stations or simply gone. How? Kes asked when his voice worked again. How did they survive months of that? Okafor glanced up from her cards.
They didn't. Mikhail died 6 days after that memory. Most of the 284th never left Stalingrad.
She played a card, considering her hand.
Next memory loads in 15 minutes. D-Day, American perspective. Fair warning, it's wet.
Kes wanted to leave. His plates screamed to leave, to find somewhere warm and safe where bodies didn't whisper about mothers while bleeding out. Instead, he picked up the crown again. 10 generations of military service. He could manage 1 day of human memories. The D-Day experience made Stalingrad feel like meditation. From frozen hell to drowning in salt water and machine gun fire. Sergeant William Harper vomited over the side of the landing craft along with half his unit. Men prayed or wrote names on helmets, or just stared at nothing while their boat rode swells toward a beach that would kill most of them. The Nazi positions were supposed to be destroyed by naval bombardment. The craters on the beach proved the Navy had hit something, just not the bunkers currently painting the surf red. The ramp dropped. Harper pushed forward into water that came up to his chest, weighted down by gear that seemed designed to drown soldiers before bullets could find them. A boy from Iowa took a round through the head 3 steps off the boat, painting Harper's face with brain matter and fragments of a life that would never reach that beach. Push forward. No choice but forward. Men screamed for medics that couldn't come because the medics were dying too. Gut shot and calling for their own help while trying to hold others' intestines in place. Harper made it to the seawall, not through skill or tactics, but through the simple mathematics of machine guns having finite rates of fire and other men catching bullets meant for him. His unit, what remained, huddled behind concrete that chipped away under German fire. Their lieutenant was gone, left his head in the surf. Radio operator had no radio and no jaw. Harper was in charge now. 13 men looking at him to make the dying mean something. The memory gave Kes every sensation. Wet sand in his boots, salt burning his eyes, the way his hands wouldn't stop shaking as he tried to signal the engineer with the Bangalore torpedo. The familiar smell of cordite and copper and shit because dying men lose all dignity along with their lives. The sound. God, the sound of that beach was mechanical death served at 1,100 rounds per minute. They took the bunker eventually. It cost 8 more men and Harper's left eye, but they took it. The memory ended with Harper staring at dead German soldiers who looked exactly like the Iowa boy on the beach, young and scared, and a long way from home. Kess surfaced from that memory to find the platform half empty. Dara had lasted 10 minutes before fleeing. The Darathi hadn't returned. Others sat on the floor, interfaces discarded, trying to process experiences their species had never evolved to handle.
Next memory in 10 minutes,
Tanaka announced.
Rwanda, 1994. Peacekeeping perspective.
A Sishin cadet raised a trembling hand. How many more?
6 total in the basic series, then specialized tracks based on your area of focus.
Tanaka's tone suggested this was perfectly reasonable, like itemizing atrocities was standard curriculum.
Completion isn't mandatory.
But it was. Not officially, but Kess saw how the veterans watched. Not with judgment, but with something worse. Understanding. They knew what the memories contained because they'd lived them, just as their ancestors did. Every flinch, every abandoned platform was a cadet admitting they couldn't handle what these humans carried daily. The Rwanda memory broke him. No combat this time, which made it worse. Captain Jean-Baptiste Durand of the Belgian peacekeepers stood between a machete-wielding mob and a church full of Tutsi refugees. The rules of engagement were clear. Observe and report. Do not intervene. Do not fire unless fired upon. Machetes weren't firearms. Durand stood there with his rifle shouldered, arms spread wide, trying to make his body a wall between death and children. The mob leader, eyes wild on home-brewed alcohol and radio propaganda, explained in calm French how this was necessary, how the Tutsis were cockroaches, how killing children prevented future insurgents. A little girl gripped Durand's leg, maybe 6 years old, wearing a school uniform gone gray with dust. She didn't cry. Children who'd seen their families hacked apart had no tears left. The mob pushed closer. Durand's men held position, fingers on triggers they couldn't pull, watching humanity eat itself alive. The memory spared nothing. Not the sound machetes make on bone. Wet, meaty, nothing like movies. Not the way the bodies twitch after what should be killing blows. Not the smell of mass death in African heat. Not Durand's rage, so pure it felt like insanity, standing there with enough firepower to stop this, but forbidden by bureaucrats an ocean away who'd never smell what he was smelling. The mob pushed past. Durand couldn't shoot. The little girl understood before he did, releasing his leg and walking back toward the church. She didn't run. What was the point? The killing took 4 hours. Durand stood there for every second, rifle growing heavier, listening to people die because lawyers in New York had decided intervention might upset regional stability. The memory ended with Durand's report, delivered in a monotone that suggested a man hollowed out from the inside. Observed ethnic violence at coordinates provided. Estimated 800 casualties. Peacekeeping force maintained defensive posture per ROE, requesting immediate reassignment. Guess came out of that memory crying openly. Around him, platforms stood empty. Maybe a dozen cadets remained from the original cohort. A Thraxian was curled in a corner, wings wrapped around themselves. Another cadet, species unclear through the neural disorientation, had collapsed by the door, trying to leave but unable to make their legs work. Okafor was there, offering water, not speaking, just present, her prosthetic word as she crouched beside him. Up close, Kess could see the fine scars around the attachment point, the way she shifted her weight to compensate. "Why?" The word came out raw. "Why did you stay? Why share this?" "Wrong question," she said, same as before. "But you're getting warmer." The human quarters occupied a section of the academy that felt deliberately separated from everything else, like someone had drawn a circle around grief and labeled it, "Do not disturb." Kess found them there after midnight, drawn by laughter that seemed impossible given what they carried. The rec room looked like every military common area since someone invented both militaries and commonality. Worn furniture, outdated entertainment system, coffee that could strip paint. The veterans clustered around a table covered in cards, drinks, and what might generously be called food. "Kid made it through Wawanda," Washington announced, not looking up from his cards. "Pay up, Lou." Money changed hands. They'd been betting on him. Somehow that felt more honest than sympathy would have.
Sit.
Santos patted a chair that had seen better decades.
Coffee?
"I don't." Cass started to say his species didn't process caffeine, but she was already pouring. The gesture mattered more than the beverage. He sat, armor clicking against cheap plastic. "First time?" Volkov asked. His accent turned the words into poetry written in suffering. "The memories, I mean. First time sharing them?" Okafor snorted.
He means first time having someone else actually understand them. Usually people just nod and say, "Thank you for your service," and change the subject.
"Beats the alternative," Washington added. "I had a therapist once tell me war was just organized violence, like that fucking explained anything. Lady had a doctorate and thought PTSD stood for pretty typical soldier disorder." They laughed. Kess couldn't understand how they laughed.
"You think we're insane?"
Liu said, not a question.
"Laughing about it, making jokes."
"I think," Kess chose his words like navigating a minefield, which wasn't far from truth, "that you've seen things that would break most minds. And you're still here, still functional."
"Functional?"
Santos repeated, tasting the word.
"Yeah, that's one way to put it. I sleep 3 hours a night and check every room for exits. Super functional."
"But you're alive," Washington added. "And tomorrow, maybe some kid doesn't have to learn what white phosphorus does to human skin because you shared that memory today. Maybe some general thinks twice because his aide went through Fallujah." Cass thought of Dara, probably in their quarters, polishing his armor and pretending today hadn't happened. Thought of the empty platforms, the fled cadets, the Darathi who might never return. "My people," he said slowly. "We glorify war. 10 generations of my family honored for their service. We have museums dedicated to famous battles. Children play with toy weapons and dream of earning their plates in combat." "Every species does," Okafor said. "Until they don't." "But you still fight. Earth still has military forces." "Because sometimes," Washington's voice went quiet, "the alternative is worse. Sometimes you stand between machetes and children. Sometimes you take that hill or lose the war. But that doesn't mean we have to like it. Doesn't mean we have to pretend it's anything other than the worst thing our species does to itself." Volkov poured something clear into small glasses, distributed them around the table, even gave one to Kess, who took it despite having no idea if alcohol would poison him. Seemed like the night for risks. "To the ones who didn't make it back." Volkov raised his glass. "And to the ones who left pieces behind." They drank. The liquid burned Kess's throat.
"So,
Santos shuffled cards with hands that had once held someone's intestines in place under sniper fire.
You coming back tomorrow?
There's more. Oh, kid. Washington's laugh had edges like broken glass. We haven't even gotten to the fun stuff. Tomorrow's Hiroshima. Then Vietnam has this lovely little memory about napalm and villages. Somalia's got child soldiers. Iraq has IEDs and friendly fire. Real highlight reel of human achievement. Why? Kes asked again. Why share your worst moments? This time, Okafor answered properly.
Because our worst moments are when we learned who we really are. And if we're going to work together, fight together, maybe die together, you need to know who you're standing beside. Not the propaganda version, not the heroic bullshit, the real thing. Plus,
Leo added,
every species thinks they invented warfare, that their way of killing is somehow more civilized. Your people have your armor and traditions. The Altai have their mountain fortresses. The Xetians have their deep-sea combat. But it all ends the same. Bodies and grief, and people trying to make sense of senseless things.
They played cards until the station's artificial dawn, teaching Kes games with rules that seemed to change based on who was losing. They told stories, not about war, but about the spaces between. Santos's daughter learning to walk, Washington's failed barbecue restaurant, Volkov's collection of terrible poetry, normal things that seemed miraculous from people who'd seen so much abnormality. When Kes finally left, Okafor walked him to the door. Her prosthetic clicked against the floor in rhythm with his armor.
Tomorrow will be worse,
she said. Not a warning, just fact.
Hiroshima isn't combat, it's aftermath. It's what happens when science serves slaughter. You don't have to come back, kid.
Yes, Kes said, surprising himself with the certainty. I do. 23 cadets entered the simulation room the next morning. 6 from Kes's original cohort, the rest drawn by morbid curiosity or misplaced pride. Dara wasn't among them, but his absence felt louder than attendance would have. Commander Thren himself observed from the control booth, all arms folded in what Kes now recognized as discomfort rather than disapproval. The mighty Althari warrior, teacher of tactics, observer of actual consequence.
Today's memory comes from Dr. Shiro Tanaka,
the human scientist announced, and Kes caught the family resemblance.
My great-uncle. He was a physician in Hiroshima, August 6th, 1945. This memory begins 3 hours after the detonation.
The crown felt heavier this time. Kes knew what was coming, not the specifics, but the weight. The other memories had been personal horrors. This would be different. This would be what happened when physics joined the killing. The memory began in silence. Not peace, the absence of sound where sound should be. Dr. Tanaka stood in what used to be his hospital, now open to sky that burned the wrong color. His first thought wasn't about the destroyed building or the vaporized colleagues. It was confusion. Where were the sounds of a city of 300,000 people? Then the survivors started arriving. They walked like ghosts because that's essentially what they were. People who should be dead but hadn't realized it yet. Skin hung from their bodies in sheets, eyes melted shut or burned away entirely. Some still wore patterns of their clothing burned into their flesh like tattoos drawn in agony. A woman held what she thought was her baby, but was just a bundle of charred cloth. She wouldn't let go. Dr. Tanaka tried to help, applied bandages that slid off with the skin, gave water that killed because radiation had shredded intestinal walls. watched patients seem to recover, then collapse as their white blood cells stopped existing. He didn't understand what had happened. The word atomic meant nothing yet. Just knew that medicine had rules, and those rules no longer applied. A little boy, maybe 8, skin relatively intact. Good, Dr. Tanaka thought. Here was someone he could save. The boy smiled, grateful for attention. Died 12 hours later, as his organs liquefied from radiation that had passed through him like light through glass, but left death in its wake. The memory gave Kes every detail. The smell of burned flesh mixed with ozone. The way radiation sickness presented like a dozen diseases at once. Sound of Dr. Tanaka's own breathing, ragged through a mask that did nothing against particles that could kill at the molecular level. Mostly, it gave him the confusion, the desperate need to understand why nothing worked, why people who should live died, and those who should die lingered in agony. 3 days of this. 3 days of watching Hiroshima die, not from the blast, but from the invisible poison it left behind. Dr. Tanaka worked until he collapsed, got up, worked more, made notes that would later help identify radiation sickness, learned through failure what didn't work, knowledge paid for in lives he couldn't save. The memory ended with Dr. Tanaka's journal entry. Medicine assumes the human body wants to heal. This weapon has made healing impossible. We are not doctors anymore. We are witnesses to what science unleashed. Kes emerged to find 3 cadets convulsing on platforms, neural overload from experiencing cellular death. Another had clawed grooves in their chair's armrests. The Thraxian from yesterday was gone again, wings leaving powder where they'd been beaten against walls. But some remained. Some always remained. That wasn't war, a Sician cadet said, voice like drowning. That was extinction. That was war, Washington corrected from where the veterans sat. Just the logical endpoint when you stop asking, should we, and only ask, can we? Commander Thren descended from his booth. His perfect coordination looked wrong now, theatrical, next to humans who'd earned their movements in worse places. Enough, he said, not loud but carrying command. This exercise serves no purpose. You're traumatizing my cadets with ancient history.
Your cadets?
Okafor stood, prosthetic locking with an audible click.
The ones training to kill for governments that will dress it up in prettier words? Those cadets?
We train warriors, not butchers.
Same thing,
Volkov said mildly.
Just depends on perspective. Your warriors look like butchers from the ground.
Thren's upper arms flared. Threat display, dominance posturing. Would have worked on most species. The veterans didn't even look up from their cards. I'm pulling my cadets from this program, Thren announced. Earth's contributions are noted, but incompatible with Academy standards.
Fine.
Liu dealt another hand.
We'll pack up, head home, let you get back to your clean simulations where nobody's daughter burns alive in their arms. Much more educational.
Cass found himself standing. His armor rattled. Not threat display, but something deeper. I want to continue. Cadet Kes Caparo, you're dismissed. No. The words surprised everyone, including him. Sir, respectfully, I need to see the rest. You need nothing of the sort. Report to medical for neural screening. Then...
He needs to understand,
Santos interrupted.
They all do. Because one day, Commander, you'll send them to war. And war doesn't care about your academy's standards, or your posturing, or how many generations of warriors you've bred. War is a little girl trying to hold her intestines in place while calling for her mother. War is choosing between burning children and losing battles. War is what happens when all your simulations meet reality, and reality wins.
Thren's lower arms made a gesture Kess didn't recognize. Might have been confusion. Might have been fear. My cadets know war. We've studied every major conflict in hegemony space. Analyzed tactics, strategies, outcomes. You've studied chess. Washington cut him off. We're showing them the board is made of meat. A long silence. Other cadets watched, waited. The few who'd survived Hiroshima against the many who'd fled. But the fled ones lingered at the doorways, drawn back by something stronger than horror. One question, Threx said finally. Why did you volunteer for this? To relive your worst moments for species you barely know? The veterans exchanged looks, some conversation and glances that spoke of long nights and shared understanding.
Because,
Okafor said,
every species thinks they're special, thinks their wars are cleaner, their cause is more just. The gravity works the same everywhere. So does blood. And maybe if enough people understand that, really understand it, fewer kids come home in boxes, or don't come home at all.
And if they don't learn, if they take these memories and become better killers, then we failed. Washington shrugged. But at least we tried. That's more than most do. Thren stood there, perfect warrior posture crumbling into something more honest. 4 arms meant for battlefield commands hanging useless at his sides. Continue your program, he said finally. Optional participation. I'll observe. He took a crown from an empty station, held it like it might explode, which, in a way, it would. Sir, Kess said. You don't have to. Yes. Thren echoed Kess's words from the night before. I do. The day Thren broke, everything changed. He'd chosen what he thought would be easier, a combat medic's memory instead of frontline infantry. Okafor had tried to warn him. Combat medics saw the arithmetic of war, what bullets subtracted from bodies, what remained to save. The memory lasted 12 seconds. Thren experienced Okafor trying to save an enemy combatant while under sniper fire, her unit screaming at her to let him die, choosing healing over safety right up until the IED turned the world white. He emerged screaming in frequencies that made every Althari in the building clutch their auditory organs. How? He gasped when his voice worked in ranges others could hear. How do you choose healing in that moment?
Someone has to,
Okafor replied.
Or we're all just murderers with flags.
The simulation room transformed after that. Word spread through barracks and mess halls, through training grounds and study chambers. Cadets came not for glory or grades, but for understanding. They watched their commander's certainty shatter against human memory. They felt their own assumptions die in rice paddies and desert towns, in frozen forests and burning cities. The resignations started small. A Darathi cadet who'd experienced Somalia turned in their commission, saying they couldn't serve leaders who'd never smelled what orders cost. A Sishan who'd lived through Vietnam's river battles declared their intention to study medicine instead of tactics. Others followed, not fleeing from service, but transforming it. They wanted to heal, to build, to prevent, rather than perfect the machinery of death.
This is catastrophic,
Sub-Commander Helix informed Thren during an emergency staff meeting.
"We're losing our best candidates."
Are we? Thren's arms moved in patterns Helix didn't recognize. Not military signals, but something more primal. Or are we losing those who understand what we're actually asking them to do? The retained cadets were different too. Those who stayed after experiencing humanity's memories didn't swagger or posture. They moved like the veterans, economical, alert, carrying invisible weight. They asked different questions in tactical classes. Not how to win, but how to end conflicts faster. Not how to destroy, but how to preserve what could be saved. Kess found himself leading study groups that felt more like therapy sessions. Cadets who'd survived different memories, comparing notes, trying to process experiences their species never evolved to handle. The Thraxian who'd fled twice came back, wings trembling, and made it through Fallujah by focusing on the Marine who'd shared water with a wounded insurgent.
Not understand,
they said after.
Enemies, why share water?
Because, Jerome had answered, happening to pass by. Thirsty is thirsty. Human is human. Sometimes that's all that matters. The Academy's final examination tradition involved elaborate combat scenarios, multi-species units competing for resources, territories, objectives. This year felt different. Kess's unit, all survivors of human memories, approached their scenario, urban warfare, civilian evacuation, with methods that made observers uncomfortable. They lost. Tactically, strategically, completely. Spent too much time evacuating civilians, wasted resources on medical supplies, failed to secure key positions because they were busy clearing escape routes for non-combatants. They also saved every simulated life in their sector. Enemy wounded received same treatment as their own. Children reached safe zones. The defeated unit sat together afterwards, sharing rations and comparing notes on evacuation procedures.
"Unacceptable,"
traditional instructors declared.
"Military objectives unmet, resources wasted, enemy forces allowed to escape."
Lives preserved, Thren countered. His transformation from rigid commander to something else had been painful to watch. Civilian trust earned, future insurgency prevented by not creating martyrs or orphans. The schism was spreading beyond the Academy. Videos leaked of cadets refusing to complete human memories, of others returning changed. Parents who'd sent warriors to the Academy watched them come back as something else. Not weaker, but focused differently. The Hegemony Council demanded explanations, which was why Kess found himself standing before representatives of 7 species, trying to explain why half of their best military candidates had abandoned traditional service.
"Human memories are corrupting our youth,"
the Althari representative declared, arms waving in patterns of disgust.
"They return home speaking of healing and preservation instead of glory and victory."
With respect, Kess kept his voice level. They return home understanding what glory costs, who pays for victory.
Soldiers pay, as they always have."
Children pay, Kess corrected. Families, civilizations, worlds. We've been teaching tactics while ignoring arithmetic. Every glory comes with a price in grief. The resigned candidates shame their families, a Rulani elder stated. Might have been Kess's great-uncle. Hard to tell through the ceremonial armor. Generations of service thrown away for human squeamishness. The word sparked something. Kess thought of Mikhail choking on his own blood in Stalingrad, of Dr. Tanaka trying to save radiation victims with bandages, of Captain Durand forbidden to stop a genocide. Squeamishness. I request the Council experience one memory, Kess said. Just one. Then judge our squeamishness. Debate raged for hours, traditional voices against radical change, but curiosity won. It always did. They chose Rwanda, thinking peacekeeping meant safety. Kess watched 7 of the most powerful beings in hegemony space break in under 4 minutes. The Setian representative vomited across the council table. The Althari curled all arms around themselves. His own great-uncle's armor rattled in patterns that predated their species' sentience. Pure animal distress. Those who resigned, the Darathi representative whispered when they could speak. What are they doing now? Kess had prepared for this. Holographic displays showed former candidates across hegemony space. Rulani establishing trauma centers for veterans. Zetians creating civilian protection protocols. Althari developing conflict resolution techniques that didn't require ammunition. Former warriors becoming healers, builders, teachers, not because they were weak, but because they were strong enough to choose differently. They are preventing the memories, Kess explained, from being made in the first place. The vote was closer than he'd expected. 4-3, but it passed. The Academy would continue offering human memories. More importantly, resignation would no longer mean shame. Those who couldn't finish simulations would be offered alternative paths. Medicine, engineering, diplomacy, different ways to serve that didn't require creating more memories like the ones they'd experienced. After the council, Kess found the veterans preparing to leave. Their work was done, transformation achieved. Time to go home, carry their memories back to Earth, where at least the gravity was familiar. Thank you, he said, knowing how inadequate it sounded.
Don't thank us.
Okafor was packing with mechanical movements, each item in its place.
Make it mean something.
How? She paused, hand on a photograph Kess couldn't quite see.
Every species asks their young to die for others. We're asking you to live for them instead. Build things, heal things. Make the kind of world where nobody needs to carry memories like ours.
And if conflict comes anyway?
Then you'll face it knowing the cost. Really knowing it. Not glory or honor or tradition, the actual price in lives and grief and futures that won't happen. Sometimes that knowledge makes you fight harder. Sometimes it makes you find another way. Both are kinds of strength.
They left the next morning. Kess watched their ship depart, carrying memories that had changed everything. The Academy felt different without them. Quieter, but somehow heavier, like the walls had absorbed some fraction of what they'd shared. 3 months later, the new curriculum was in full effect. Traditional combat training continued, but balanced with mandatory medical courses, civilian protection protocols, conflict de-escalation. Every simulation now included aftermath, not just winning battles, but dealing with what victory left behind. Kess led a mixed unit through urban evacuation drills. Half were traditional cadets, half were those who'd returned after resigning. The integration was rough but improving. Hard to maintain warrior swagger when the person beside you had experienced Dredzen's firestorm through a child's eyes.
Contact left!
Someone called. Simulated insurgents in a hospital. Traditional tactical doctrine said neutralize the threat, secure the building. Medical status? Kess asked instead.
Functional hospital. 43 patients, 12 critical.
Evacuation routes.
Blocked by hostile forces.
Old Kess would have called for suppressing fire, dynamic entry, threat neutralization. New Kess remembered a medic in Fallujah who'd treated insurgents alongside Marines because hurt was hurt.
Thaxon, Vera, establish dialogue. Tell them we'll evacuate their wounded with ours if they hold fire. Medical team preps for triage. Everyone else secures transport.
Sir, a traditional cadet protested. They're enemies.
They're in a hospital,
Another cadet corrected. She'd lived through Okafor's memory. It worked, not perfectly. 2 simulated casualties during the evacuation, but 41 patients reached safety, including 6 insurgents who'd have died without treatment. In the debrief, arguments raged about tactical failure versus humanitarian success.
You could have taken the building,
Instructor Kellos insisted. Old guard, never experienced the memories.
eliminated threats, and killed how many patients in the crossfire?
Kess countered.
Created how many new insurgents from grieving families? We saved lives. That's the mission. The mission is victory. Victory is...
Kess paused, thinking of Washington's words.
Going home with a soul you can live with.
The real test came during final evaluations, a massive joint exercise involving all Academy units. The scenario? Ethnic conflict on a colony world, 2 populations claiming same territory, escalating violence. Traditional units would compete for control of strategic resources. Kess's mixed unit had different plans. They split into small teams, medical stations in conflict zones, negotiators working with both factions, engineers repairing infrastructure to benefit everyone. When violence erupted, and it did, scenarios always included violence. They responded not with overwhelming force, but with evacuations, shields, minimum necessary intervention. Other units mocked them, peacekeepers playing at war. But something strange happened. Simulated civilians started cooperating, providing intelligence, hiding their medical supplies from raid attempts. The 2 ethnic factions, seeing neutral parties actually helping, began talking. Not peace, too early for that, but talking.
Unrealistic,
Traditionalists scoffed. Civilians don't behave that way.
They do,
Jerome said from the observation deck. He'd stayed as an advisor, teaching cadets what memories couldn't.
When you treat them like people instead of obstacles. When they see you'll bleed to protect their kids same as your own.
The exercise ended without clear victors. Traditional units held more territory, but faced constant insurgency. Kess's approach controlled less, but what they held was stable. The evaluation board struggled to score it. How do you quantify prevented suffering? What's the tactical value of trust? Dara found Kess after, still in traditional program, but something had changed. His armor didn't rattle superiority anymore.
I experienced one, he admitted. After you spoke to the council. Sierra Leone. Child soldiers.
He paused, searching for words.
They gave children guns and drugs and told them killing made them men. The memory, the human recording it, had been one of those children. Later became a doctor, spent his life trying to heal what he'd done at 9 years old. And I understand now why you changed, why they resigned. I'm not strong enough to take a different path, but I understand.
That was the victory, Kess realized. Not converting everyone, but creating understanding, making space for those who chose differently. The Academy graduated 2 classes that year. Traditional warriors who'd learned war's true cost, and new guardians dedicated to preventing it. Both necessary, both honorable, both serving with full knowledge of what service meant. The hegemony's next conflict came 3 years later. Border dispute with an aggressive neighbor, the kind that traditionally escalated to full warfare. But the commanders making decisions now included those who'd lived through human memories, who'd felt what escalation cost in personal terms. They tried negotiation first, then economic pressure. When violence became unavoidable, they fought, but differently. Civilian evacuation preceded military action. Enemy wounded received treatment. Occupation focused on rebuilding rather than punishment. Not perfect, not bloodless, but intentional in ways previous conflicts hadn't been. The war ended in months instead of years, not through superior firepower, but superior understanding. Enemy populations treated as people rather than targets withdrew support from their own extremists. Soldiers who'd been shown mercy showed it in return. The peace that followed felt more like healing than tired acceptance. Earth's gift, historians would later call it. The memories that changed how the hegemony thought about conflict. But Kess knew better. Earth's gift wasn't the memories themselves, but what they taught. That true strength lay not in enduring horror, but in learning from it. That warriors who'd seen war's face made the fiercest guardians of peace. He kept a photo on his desk. The veterans on their last day, playing cards and laughing about something beyond the frame. Okafor had been right about the question. Not why did they share their pain, but what do we do with it? Make it mean something. Every day, every choice, every life saved instead of taken, every conflict prevented instead of won. Every cadet who learned that the highest military honor wasn't dying for others, but living for them. Building the world where memories like Earth's became history instead of prophecy. The simulation nobody could finish had done its job, not by being completed, but by being understood. And in that understanding, the galaxy's newest warriors learned the most ancient truth, that every species was capable of creating horror, but only the wise chose to create something else instead.